All right, welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we are talking about the San Francisco 49ers, and I am joined by Marc Adams, writer for the 49ers Web Zone. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Any day I get to talk about football is a good day.
Yeah, no
And
kidding.
yeah, and I am a Bears fan, but
That's all right.
as you can see with the Hawkeye shirt, I enjoy talking 49ers because of my guy George Kittle.
Yeah, he's great. We love him.
Yeah, and we'll kind of get into him a little bit later, but I definitely want to talk. First and foremost, you've had a few months now for things to sink in, and maybe a little bit of a surprise playoff run from the 49ers last year, but the way it ended, how does that sit with you now? Kind of thinking back on it at this point.
It's frustrating. For one thing, every team's fans feel like they should win every game, and obviously, I remember back in the '92 playoffs when the Dallas Cowboys upset the 49ers, and the 49ers were highly favored, and Jimmy Johnson said, that team is better than our team, but we were better today. And so, I keep that in perspective. But the thing that's frustrating is just 2 years before that, the 49ers lost in the Super Bowl after having a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, halfway through the fourth quarter, and then to lose another 10-point lead in the fourth quarter of the NFC Championship's frustrating. And especially when you consider that in both of those games, Kyle Shanahan, for whatever reason, and he's brilliant, but for whatever reason, in both of those games, he went away from his best player. So Raheem Mostert, who was the best offensive player the 49ers had in the 2019 playoffs, touched the ball like 4 times in the fourth quarter. I think George Kittle touched the ball once in the fourth quarter, and Deebo Samuel didn't touch the ball at all. So fast forward to this past January, I guess, or February. I actually had COVID during the game, so I barely remember the game.
Yeah.
I had to rewatch it to write about it. So whenever that game was, the NFC Championship, I looked this up, and I wrote this down, that Deebo Samuel only touched the ball once in the fourth quarter of the NFC Championship game. George Kittle didn't touch the ball at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand that. I don't know, early in the game, in both of those games, Kyle was really creative. He had the misdirection going on, and it was really effective. But for some reason, late in the game, he goes away from that. And instead of trying to run the ball as creatively and as often, he starts getting a little pass happy. Now, one theory behind that is that when you are late in a game or you're in the fourth quarter of a big game, everybody knows, especially if you have a 10-point lead, everybody knows that he wants to run the ball. And it could be that style of run game just has problems when everybody knows that they're going to run, because he really works off of the misdirection and the trickery and the play action and those kinds of things. And so when there's no threat to pass, because everybody knows you want to run, then that kind of takes away part of the game. And so I don't know if he tries to outthink people and ends up outthinking himself, but yeah, that's frustrating, because both games the defense was playing great against 2 amazing offenses, and then the offense just stalled, and the defense after a while is going to cave in. So you need your offense to do something, and in both those games in the fourth quarter, they didn't.
It's so interesting, with these younger coaches that are supposed to be, offensive gurus. You got Sean McVay, and he wasn't able to kind of, push through to get that Super Bowl until this past year. And, he seemed to have kind of similar things. And sometimes you wonder if, some of these coaches almost get too full of themselves, and they kind of try to be too cute rather than just, do what they do and try to outsmart the other person.
Yeah.
And just kind of, really try to be innovative. And that's why they got the jobs that they're at anyway.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. It happened to Kyle Shanahan. before he came to the 49ers when he was the offensive coordinator in Atlanta against Brady and the Patriots. I don't remember, a 28-3 or something like that. They blew that lead. And I remember watching that game, and Shanahan got a lot of criticism after the game. But I also remember that defense just folding. And so I blame Kyle mostly for these two 49er losses, but I don't know. His head coach was the defensive guy. So I don't know about what took place in Atlanta. But yeah, something has to change. And if Kyle Shanahan was ever to make the horrible mistake of asking me what I thought that he needed to work on, it would be, those 49er teams in the 80s and 90s would step on your throat when they had a lead. And your Bears, but those 80s Bears, man, those guys you didn't come back on them. And so somehow this defense, which is so good, is folding at the end, but I don't really put it on the defense. I think it's the offense is not, if you go to the box score or if you go to the play-by-play, you'll see that in the fourth quarter of those games, they weren't sustaining drives, and that doesn't help your defense.
When you look at, obviously, Kyle Shanahan, he's known for running and everything. And when you look at, 2022, with the coaching losses, how much is this team going to miss Mike McDaniel?
Man, I don't know. I'm afraid to find out. I hope not much. And they brought in Anthony Lynn, who's a running game guru. So I think that's going to help. But, if you look at their last two drafts, they've drafted bigger offensive linemen. Usually Kyle Shanahan wants these guys that are a little bit quicker and more athletic, but he's drafted 4 offensive linemen in the last 2 drafts who are bigger than normal. And he's also drafted a couple of running backs who are a little bit bigger than normal. And so I just wonder if maybe there's some kind of philosophical change that's taken place, along with drafting a quarterback that's bigger than the average quarterback and is going to run the ball probably more often. So it's going to be interesting to see how he shifts, and what Mike McDaniel does in Miami versus what this running game is going to look like. Because I've heard numerous times that Mike McDaniel was kind of the artist of this running game.
Yeah, and you talked about some of those draft picks, those linemen. They're a little bit bigger. I mean, you're talking about kind of the Spencer Burford and I can't even say his name, Nick Zakelj.
Zakelj, yeah, the J's silent.
Yeah. I mean, so are those players going to be a huge factor for the 49ers offense this year? Or are they just going to be kind of like, depth pieces?
I hope just depth, because the plan is last year they drafted Aaron Banks from Notre Dame, and he didn't. I think he only played just a handful of snaps. And when I say handful, I mean in less than 10, I think. And so there, among the fan base, there's a lot of concern about, okay, is he a bust? Or is it that he's more fitted for left guard? And last year they had a left guard who I think missed one play the whole season, and that was because his shoe came off in Laken Tomlinson. And so the hope is that that Banks is going to come in and be that left guard. Daniel Brunskill plays right guard, and then Mike McGlinchey is the right tackle, and of course Trent Williams is the left tackle. And so the big question mark right now is Alex Mack. Is he coming back to play center? If he does, then I think that the offensive line is going to be okay, and these 2 rookie offensive linemen are just going to be depth pieces. If Alex Mack doesn't come back, then all bets are off, because somebody's going to have to step up at center. They've got a guy named Jake Brendel who was Max's backup last year. I don't know anything about him as far as if he's any good, because Alex Mack never really missed. And so Brunskill's played center, but it wasn't great when he played there. So I don't know. They had a couple of undrafted free agents that that some of the fans seem hopeful that these guys can be centers of the future. But I don't know if Kyle Shanahan will turn the center position over to a rookie. He likes those guys like Alex Mack who are really experienced. Weston Richburg was one of the ones that he picked when he came here. So I don't know. John Lynch said, sure, Kyle will play a rookie at center, but I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about this offensive line, and even like it seemed to be a philosophical change with some of these players that they're picking and everything. And when you look at obviously the running game has been the focal point of the offense. Even getting Deebo Samuel involved and all that. But when you look at this running defense or this run offense with the running backs, do you see Elijah Mitchell being kind of the guy, or do you see maybe Trey Sermon fitting in better with maybe Trey Lance's kind of style? And then also where does the rookie Davis Price fit in?
Well, Elijah Mitchell came out of nowhere, and we all were just blown away by how productive he was. Had he not been injured a couple of games, he would have rushed for over 1,000 yards. I think that he's really good and sturdy, a consistent back. I don't know that he is the workhorse kind of back. And really, I don't know that Kyle Shanahan wants a workhorse. The days of Frank Gore for the 49ers, I don't see coming back anytime soon, because the Shanahans, Kyle and his dad, Mike, are known for using multiple running backs. And I believe that I heard the other day that since Kyle Shanahan came to the 49ers in 2017, there's been a different leading rusher every single year for the team. So that tells you a lot. Last year, there was so much injury issues that I think that that's another thing that he really wants to build depth. So I believe in Elijah Mitchell. I just don't know if he's going to be the guy like he was last year. And one reason is because I think that they drafted Trey Sermon with a plan in mind. And I think that part of that plan is that when he was at Oklahoma, he ran a lot of pistol, which I think that they might employ some with Trey Lance. And I haven't given up on him yet. I think last year in the third game of the season, he ran the ball pretty well against the Green Bay Packers. After that game, we barely saw him again. And so everybody's wondering what's going on. And, there's some talk that he doesn't hit the hole like he's supposed to, that he dances too much. But I wonder if it had more to do with pass protection than anything. Because I know that Kyle Shanahan, and especially Bobby Turner, who was the running backs coach until this season, really emphasizes that with running backs. And with Bobby Turner, if you can't pass block, you're probably not going to see the field. And so that makes me wonder if Sermon got in the doghouse because he wasn't pass protecting, and now that Bobby Turner's gone, maybe he'll have a new lease on life. I know that he's been working real hard this offseason, but Ty Davis Price, the rookie running back from LSU, one of his strengths is pass protection. And the other thing is, like we mentioned earlier, how in the NFC Championship and in the Super Bowl, how they couldn't move the ball down the stretch. I'm wondering if a bigger bruising type back like Davis Price might be what they needed. I'm not saying that they would have won those games if he would have been on the field, but they definitely lacked some power from their run game. So in both of those games, so I think that those three guys are going to be key. And then the guy that people aren't talking about as much is Jeff Wilson Jr. He was hurt most of last year, and when he did come back halfway through the season, he didn't play very much. But the 2 years before that, 2018 and 2019, he was really good. And I think 2020, I think that he played really well that season. But when he's been given a chance, he's made things happen. He was in the doghouse early in his career because he puts the ball on the ground occasionally, and that's for Kyle Shanahan. You don't play very much if you fumble. So I really think that this running game is going to be good, depending on the offensive line. But I don't know what they're going to do with Trey Lance. The guy of all the quarterbacks that were drafted last season in last April 2021, he played under center more than all of those guys. But when Kyle Shanahan played him, and he only played 10 quarters the whole season last year, but when he was used in the shotgun more. So that kind of threw me off because I thought maybe Shanahan, maybe one of the things he liked about him was that he played under center so much more than Mac Jones and Justin Fields and the other guys that were drafted. But he used him differently. So I don't know.
When you look at, you brought up Trey Lance, and obviously that's a question, and nobody really knows, right? But I mean, you and your fellow podcast mates, you kind of went through, why you're not worried about Trey Lance. Give us kind of the abridged version of why you're not worried about him going into the season.
Well, for starters, people have been in the national, it's all been national media. There haven't been any local writers or local media saying, is Trey Lance ready or saying he's not ready. Joe Montana said it back the week of the Super Bowl. But I'm really convinced that when Montana said it, I think, because he said something like, I've heard from other players. And I just don't think that at that point in the season, any players would have been saying Trey Lance isn't ready. So I really think that what Joe heard, he probably heard back in training camp or beginning of the season when Trey really wasn't ready. So I just think, Kyle Shanahan was asked in March, is Trey Lance ready? And that was based on some of the media reports or rumors. And he said, yeah, he's ready. We wouldn't be trying to trade Jimmy if he wasn't. And so that gives me reason to think that he's ready. And really, he's not going to be truly ready. You don't get ready unless you play. And so he needs to play. But the other thing that I think about is that they are trying to trade Jimmy. And if they had concerns, I think that they would want to keep Jimmy on the roster. Another thing is that when Trey came to training camp last July, from what I've heard, the players and the coaches, were really impressed with how far he had come along since the mandatory minicamp like a month earlier. And so then we saw him. He started his first game in Arizona against the Cardinals when Garoppolo got hurt the previous week against Seattle. And he looked like a rookie. He did some really good things, converted several fourth down plays, but he looked like a rookie at times. But then about 9 weeks later, when he had to start against the Houston Texans, he looked like a totally different quarterback. And so if he can make that kind of leap without playing, then I think this offseason, I would expect another leap from him. But then one of the big things is that some of his teammates have come out and said things on his behalf without being asked. And like Trent Williams called, I don't have that with me, but Trent Williams called him something like a transformational player or something to that effect that really made me go, whoa. And I think either Jimmy Ward or Fred Warner, one of those defensive players, said almost daily he does things in practice that make you say, wow. And so I think that I think that he's going to get ready. Will he be ready week one against the Bears? I don't know, but I think the more he plays, the better he's going to get.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the Bears, and is there another quarterback that was taken in that draft that you would rather take? Like, would you rather have like Justin Fields or another quarterback in that draft as opposed to Trey Lance?
When all the rumors were that they were going to select Mac Jones, I was like, no. And it wasn't because I didn't think he would be good. I just felt like I remembered how things were with Steve Young. And I
Mm.
remembered how things were with Colin Kaepernick his first couple of seasons, where it was so dynamic. And yeah, I mean, Mac Jones, I think he's going to be really good, but I think that he's going to be really good within the system. If the play breaks down, he's in trouble. So I wanted somebody like Justin Fields or Trey Lance, who, when the play breaks down, can do something with their legs or do something crazy with their arm. I was going back and forth. I would say probably at the time of the draft, I wanted Justin Fields, but I was thinking as long as it's Fields or Lance, I'm going to be happy. And at this point, I haven't seen enough from either one of those guys to say I wish I had Fields. Of course, one of the other kids, the name slipped me, that went number one to the Jags, but
Oh yeah,
that,
Trevor Lawrence. Yeah.
yeah, I think anybody would have wanted him because he was the best quarterback prospect who's come maybe since Patrick Mahomes, and even then Mahomes wasn't highly touted, in that draft. So at this point, I'm really happy with Trey Lance, but we'll see at the end of the season. What's Justin Fields going to look like? What's Trey Lance going to look like? I felt bad for Fields because he was just kind of thrown in there. His offense didn't give him much help. I don't know if his coach gave him much help. He got hurt, and I felt bad for the kid. But yeah, I think there was a play against the 49ers where he kind of was off to the right side, kind of like if you're watching it on the screen, kind of down at the screen. And they had him trapped, and somehow he escaped and went all the way around and scored. And I was like, good grief. That's what I want. The Colin Kaepernick running for 181 yards against the Packers in the playoffs. That kind of thing is pretty special. But yeah, I think both of those guys are going to be really good.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at a quarterback, you want, as many different possibilities. If stuff breaks down, you want him to be able to kind of make something out of it. But I think it is interesting, and it's so easy to forget with any of these quarterbacks that, even back to Peyton Manning, it took them a while to get used to things. And we want things to happen so quickly. And it didn't, I mean, it's taken Joe Burrow, obviously a couple years with his injury and stuff, but he's been pretty quick on things. But it's also who he had as well, having that Jamar Chase, having that connection from college really helped as well.
Huge. Yeah, and Jamar Chase is crazy good. I could not believe how good he was as a rookie. Kind of reminded me of when Randy Moss was a rookie, where you just think, Jerry Rice wasn't this good as a rookie. How's Moss this good? But he was, and that's how Jamar Chase was this year. It's if he gets better, it's going to be scary.
Well, speaking of a player that's been crazy good, and I feel like every team is kind of wanting to find the next Deebo Samuel. What are you hearing kind of the latest from the Deebo situation?
Well, I think that he overplayed his hand a little bit. He scrubbed his social media from anything 49ers related. Let it be known that he was angry and that he wanted to be traded. I think that in his mind, he thought, especially when he saw Devontae Adams get traded, and I don't remember who the other one was around that time, but I think that he's thinking, they'll trade me, they'll get a boatload for me, and then I'll get paid, 25 to 30 million a year. And they weren't offered what the rumors were, and the rumors were that the Jets were going to offer something, like Godfather kind of offer that couldn't be refused. And that didn't happen. They offered I think the number 10 pick, and then wanted the 49ers second round pick. And then they were going to offer some kind of late round pick. And so it was offensive, no way. And so they decided, we're not going to trade him. And they didn't. And I think that at that point, Deebo may have realized, okay, maybe I don't know. Maybe I need to come back to the team. He's softened a little bit. So he's followed the 49ers again on social media. I think that they will before training camp, maybe right before training camp, because that's how they often do things. Offer him a contract extension. I think that he'll take it, and I think that things will be fine. But one thing that worried me was I heard Michael Irvin speaking on 95.7 The Game out of San Francisco, and he said that during the week of the Super Bowl, he talked to Deebo. And he said that he was doing that Deebo, whoa, just having fun with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that after they played around for a little bit, that Michael told Deebo, look, go get your money, but listen, you need to be with Kyle. You need to be with the 49ers. That's where you're at your best. And he said that Deebo looked at him like, and Michael said, I don't think he took that very well. And so that worried me because it made me think, oh, man, what if he's thinking to himself, I don't need Kyle, and I'm going to prove it. Because I remember when the 49ers won the Super Bowl, in the 1988 Super Bowl, it was Bill Walsh's last game. And I've heard multiple players, they came back and won it again in 89, and I've heard multiple players say, we wanted to win that one more than ever because we wanted to prove we could do it without Bill. Now, that wasn't a shot at Bill. It just was they wanted to, Walsh got all the credit, and they wanted to show we could do it without him too. And so that made me a little nervous with Deebo, but I think that he's calming down a little bit.
Do you think there's any possibility that he would sit out this season if something doesn't happen?
No, I don't. I think that with the collective bargaining agreement, the way it is, if a player sits out even like training camp, they're gonna get killed financially. Now, there is a thing that some are doing these days. Instead of holding out, they're holding in. So they come, they report, but then they fake an injury or something like that. But I just don't. I don't think that Deebo is going to do that. And the way things are now, if he was to do that, from what I understand, this final season on his contract actually becomes like paused. And so it would move over to the next season. So, and I think it's probably to prevent things like what Le'Veon Bell did. And so it does him no good to sit out the season. I think he has to come play. Now, he could sit out training camp. He could sit out preseason, but which I hope that he doesn't do because he has a history of injuries, especially like little injuries, little nagging things. And those are the kind of things that players who sit out training camp and preseason end up dealing with early in the next season. So I hope that he doesn't. I hope that he's staying in shape and shows up. They started OTAs today. I don't believe he reported, and I wouldn't expect him to report till training camp, but I think they'll get something worked out before training camp starts.
Well, yeah, they almost need to get something worked out. When you look at this, wide receiver core, I mean, Brandon Ayuk, supposedly he's out of the doghouse. Do you see him, taking a step up in this offense this year? Obviously, regardless of what happens with Deebo.
I think that Brandon Ayuk is going to take a huge leap. He's been working out with Trey Lance in the offseason. And early in the season last year, he was in the doghouse. And none of us knew why. The 49ers wouldn't admit to it. But I wondered because I'd heard that he was upset when Garoppolo was named the starting quarterback, that Ayuk was not happy about that. And so I wonder if he started loafing, if he wasn't, because one of the things that Kyle Shanahan wants from his receivers is he wants them to block. And so there were times that I think that you could see that Ayuk wasn't quite doing everything he needed to do. And so then he and Kyle kind of had a come to Jesus meeting. And from that point on, Ayuk was great. But I think that what Lance brings to the table fits Ayuk a little better as far as his skills. So I think that he's going to come back focused. I think that Lance is going to be named the starter. And I think that the offseason work they've done together is going to pay dividends once the year starts. And as far as Jawan Jennings, I love Jawan Jennings. He not only is he nasty when he's blocking, but he is every time he catches a pass, it goes for a first down or a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but at the end of the season, we actually were throwing that around on Twitter that it seemed like it was a crazy high percentage of his catches went for a touchdown or a first down. So I love that guy.
Well, speaking of another guy that I love, obviously we alluded to it earlier, George Kittle. When you look at him as tight end, is he still elite as a tight end? And where does he rank in the NFL amongst tight ends?
I definitely think he's still elite. I worry about the way he plays because he's so violent in how he plays that he gets hurt a lot. And that concerns me. I think that probably Travis Kelce is probably the best receiving tight end. I think Kittle's the best blocking tight end and probably, in my opinion, the best all-around tight end. But the fact that Kelce doesn't miss time like Kittle might make him more valuable. But I love George Kittle. I mean, he's the one of the leaders on the team. He brings energy that is infectious, and the guy is just great. I mean, when he gets the ball in his hands, he's a yak machine. I mean, he can go around people, he can go through people. So yeah, I think that he's critical. And when he's missed games, not only has the tight end position suffered from a receiving standpoint, but the running game has been hurt as well. And so that he's just so critical. And they've been trying to find somebody to be a good backup. And so far they haven't had anybody that's even come close to what Kittle can do.
Well, speaking of what Kittle does as well, I like how he's created the tight end university, and when you look at NFL players, I mean, there's only a certain fraternity, in for someone to be so competitive yet really seem to want to give back and really kind of teach the tight end position.
Yeah.
I really like what he's done with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a cool thing, and I think they had a really good showing last year. And this year, from what I hear, it's going to be even bigger. And I believe that he announced a couple of days ago that Trey Lance is going to be there as one of the quarterbacks throwing.
Wow.
So I think it's a really cool thing, and I love the camaraderie and how the players stick up for each other. And I think that that's a really important thing, especially in a game that's so violent and. And then the NFL, they're all about money. And so I think the players have to stick together. I think coaches normally are on the players' side. Front offices, not always in the league, probably never. But yeah, I love things like that. And so really proud to see what Kittle's doing as a leader, not only on the team, but league wide.
Well, speaking of a player that Kittle has always stood up for as well, Jimmy G. I mean, wearing a T-shirt of a picture of him, and so when you look at Jimmy G, I mean, where is his market now? I mean, is it conceivable that he'll be on the roster when the season starts?
I think it's very conceivable. I love Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that he came to the 49ers at a time when they were horrible and really kind of brought the fan base together, and he's done some good things. And even though sometimes he leaves a little to be desired, they've been to a Super Bowl with him. They've been to an NFC Championship game with him. So I think that he's really good. Now, he does get hurt a lot, but he's a good quarterback. And a great guy. Man, I don't know. Maybe Carolina. Maybe I would think probably next month, Jimmy should get cleared to start throwing. Maybe late June. So at that point, it's possible. But again, I think that some teams are going to be thinking, well, they're just probably going to release him. I really don't know that they will. I mean, they would love to take his $24 million salary or whatever it is, they would love to take that, because if they don't use it, then it rolls over to next season. They would love to have that 24 million to work with next season. But I don't know if they want to release him, because what if somebody like Seattle comes and signs him because he's a free agent? And then what if Seattle beats the 49ers twice? Are you kidding me? They've gone with Trey Lance, gotten rid of Jimmy, and then Seattle beats them. Now I don't think that would be likely, but if it happened, I mean, the potential of it would be enough to scare me into keeping him. I'm concerned about keeping him because I have heard Joe Montana and Steve Young talk about when Bill Walsh created a quarterback controversy, and it wasn't good. I mean, those guys got along fine, but it caused some problems in the locker room and the team in 1988 when Walsh was constantly. I mean, think about this: Montana had won 2 Super Bowls at that point, and yet Walsh has taken him out to put in Steve Young, who at that time was not Steve Young, not the Steve Young that we grew to know. And so the players didn't like that. I mean, Joe was their guy. And so it caused problems. And they at one point had a losing record and had a coaches meeting in which Walsh asked, "What's going on? Why are we having these problems?" And Mike Holmgren spoke up and said, "You're the problem. You won't settle on a quarterback." And so I guess Walsh then just decided that Joe's the guy, and they went on to win 2 more Super Bowls with him. But so that worries me, because last season at the beginning of the year, Steve Young went on KNBR radio and called the 49ers quarterback situation fraught with terror. And his point was, if Kyle Shanahan doesn't get a grasp on this, then it could be really bad. It could fracture the locker room. And it didn't, because both guys handled it so well, and Kyle stuck with Jimmy. But that worries me. So there's that part of me that's like, yeah, you'd love to have him as your backup in case Trey gets hurt. But if they open it up for a competition and Jimmy wins, I think there's going to be rioting in the Bay Area because the fans are really ready for Trey.
Well, you can imagine too. So you look at it. So they do open it up. What if they did open it up for a competition and, say Jimmy wins, because the players, they can tell. So what if he would actually win, but the coaches would still go with Trey Lance? I mean, that would almost be worse.
Yeah, it would be. I think that within the team, I don't think that they would have a problem if Jimmy won, but I think the fans would, which that doesn't matter. I mean, what the fans and media think, who cares? But it's again, you're delaying another year of Trey Lance's development. You're also putting off another year of that rookie contract and getting him closer to the time where you're going to have to pay him more money. And I think that Kyle can see the big picture. If they go through training camp and preseason and it's time for him to make a decision week 1, Jimmy's probably going to be more ready than Trey. But a few weeks down the road, that may not be the case anymore. And so I think that Kyle probably would see that.
So No Border Sports here. Thanks for tuning in here. And he had a couple of comments here. He said that Jimmy loves throwing interceptions to Fred Warner, so he would pay Seattle $7 million to take him.
Yeah, he does that. He likes throwing picks to linebackers, but Fred Warner's got a lot of them.
and when you look at him, if he is in Seattle, I mean, I just don't know if Seattle has enough.
No.
Are you really scared of him maybe in Seattle? I mean, that much, or is it just kind of like you don't want, just that the way it would look?
Yeah, I'm not afraid of Jimmy anywhere. And especially in Seattle, I don't think that they're going to be very good this year. They shipped off the boogeyman to 49ers fans. And so we're not as afraid.
Are you able to say his name?
gosh, Russell something.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Something Russell with a W. I think he maybe played volleyball.
yeah, right. Yeah, but that guy is so good, and I hated playing against Russell Wilson
Yep.
because they could dominate the game, and this not just this team, but Jim Harbaugh's teams couldn't beat him, and they would dominate the game and then get down to the end, and somehow he would pull a rabbit out of a hat and beat them. But yeah, so I'm not worried about Jimmy if he went there. I think that maybe the 49ers, even though they're not afraid of Jimmy, I think that they might be fearful that if by chance Jimmy beats them even in one of the games, then and so let's say he looks great in a game and Trey Lance looks terrible, and they don't want that. But I really don't think that would happen. I think that I think Fred Warner would pick him off a few times and it would be good. But
when you talk about being fearful, obviously, and you have the Rams. Are there any other teams within the NFC that you are worried about? I mean, other than the Rams?
I'm not really even worried about the Rams. I think that they're really good, but I still think that the 49ers should have won that game in the NFC Championship. Matthew Stafford played out of his mind there at the end, but for most of that game, he was terrible.
Yeah, and then the dropped interception, right?
Yeah. If Topolsky Tart makes that pick, I mean, I don't know if they would have won because the offense, the 49ers offense had gone really cold, and so maybe they would have just punted it right back. But I think that they've lost some players, and so I think that they're going to experience what it's like to be the reigning champs and be the team that everybody wants to beat. So they're going to get everybody's big game, and so I still think that they're really, really good though. The Bucks, as long as they have Tom Brady, then they're gonna scare me a little bit. As long as the Packers have Aaron Rodgers, he's always going to scare me. Even though the 49ers have his number, he still scares me. That guy, he's like Russell Wilson scary to me. The only difference is they always seem to beat him. And then I think Philadelphia.
I totally agree.
That's not a team that people are picking, but they've gotten really good over the offseason. So I think they may surprise some people.
I was on a podcast with a Cowboys fan prior to the AJ Brown trade, saying that I think Jalen Hurts can be in the MVP conversation, and now he really does not have any excuse not to be there. I mean, he needs to take that step, and I think he can. And if he does, when you look at the NFC, it's wide open. That could be a team that kind of surprises everybody.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was miserable being on a podcast with a Cowboys fan. That had to be brutal. So I'm sorry you had to.
No comment. No comment.
But yeah, I think Dallas. They always have a great offense, but I think Philly may win that division. Everybody's counting the Saints out because Sean Payton's gone. They've made some surprisingly good additions, and I think that if Jameis Winston improves and stops throwing so many picks and stops turning the ball over, they may be a team that makes some noise down the stretch as well. But I'm not afraid of any team because I feel like the 49ers have the best roster in the NFL. The only reason that I am not as confident is because I don't know what to expect at quarterback. And if Trey Lance plays at Jimmy Garoppolo's level this year, I think that they could win the Super Bowl. If he plays better than Jimmy, then that's great. But if he struggles, then it may be tough. And like I said, I think Trey's going to be great, but we don't know what he's going to look like early on. And that's, I know that the Bears defense has been pretty good. I don't know what they look like coming into this year, but that's going to be Lance's first start of the season. So you know more about the Bears defense than I do.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's almost the best team to really start off against, because the Bears, they're still kind of feeling themselves out as far as kind of what they're going to be. I mean, Roquan Smith is there, it's new defensive staff. So, if Trey Lance is going to, start off well, the Bears would probably be the best team, because I'm not really expecting much out of the Bears overall this year. Just so many holes to fill defensively, and I like what they did in the secondary, but they're going to be young, and so it. Obviously, you have Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. They could exploit the young secondary early on in the season. And so that'll be an interesting game, really, to see which way it goes for both teams, because it could really, swing the Bears. If the Bears start off on a win that way, that could swing Justin Fields off on a positive, and, vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said earlier, Justin Fields had a really good game against the 49ers. That was, in fact, I think, if I remember right, he had been pretty bad leading up to that. And that game was probably his best one, maybe of the season, right? That I live in the Chicago area, so I hear a lot about the Bears and Justin Fields, but
that or the Steelers one. Yeah, I mean, he had flashes. The 49ers probably overall, yes, and then the Steelers one, obviously on prime time. I mean, that was a good one, but I think the 49ers one was probably yes. Yep.
Yeah, and that was his first good one, right?
Yeah, and when you look at it too, I mean, that was against a really solid defense, right? And you look at the 49ers, from last year to even this year, I mean, is it going to be the same defense this year? And what are you kind of expecting, from the defense in 2022?
I actually think they're going to be better. They don't have Jaquiski Tartt, but I think that they have some young guys that they believe in. Talanoa Hufanga is most likely going to be the one that replaces Tartt at strong safety. He has some issues, but he always seems to be around the ball. Jimmy Ward is always Jimmy Ward. He's a playmaker. He doesn't pick off a lot of passes, but he's just solid. They signed Charvarius Ward from the Chiefs. He's a really solid corner. And then they have Emmanuel Mosley and Ambry Thomas, who ended the season as the two corners. And then they're bringing back Jason Verrett, who gets hurt every year, but when he's healthy is as good as anybody. And so I think that the secondary has the potential to be the best one that Kyle Shanahan's had. And that includes the season they had Richard Sherman, or the couple of seasons. The linebacker core is the same. So they're going to continue to be great. And they drafted Drake Jackson out of USC, who we're hoping ends up replacing Dee Ford, because he's got good speed off the edge. He's got a lot of bend. And if the 49ers can get somebody opposite Nick Bosa who can get after the quarterback, that defense is going to go back to 2019 good, because Bosa's double teamed every single play. They lost DJ Jones, who was the anchor of that run defense, but they're getting back Javon Kinlaw, and Kinlaw has really been a disappointment so far, but he's been hurt ever since they drafted him. If he can be what they drafted him to be, then he could be a force that not only stuffs the run, but pushes the pocket and maybe makes things a little better for Bosa and for Eric Armstead. But they have the potential, and they've got a lot of depth there. They brought back Kerry Hyder Jr. They brought in some other guys in the offseason. And so I think that defensive front is going to be relentless again.
So if you look at, if you were to look at it and say there is, this is the weakness of the defense, what would you say that would be?
I think until we know what happens at strong safety, because if it is Talanoa Hufanga, he's going to make some plays. He's going to be great in the run game, but he has a tendency to get lost in coverage. And so that could be the weakness. And again, not knowing what Javon Kinlaw is going to bring, because DJ Jones is a huge loss. And if Kinlaw can replace DJ Jones, he was drafted to replace DeForest Buckner, but that hasn't happened. Buckner's so good. But if he can replace DJ Jones, then I think that could be a huge plus And then the other thing is they have to get some kind of pass rush from the edge on the opposite side of Nick Bosa. That just has to happen. But yeah, I think that I would say the edge opposite Bosa, Kinlaw's spot, that is replacing DJ Jones, and then the strong safety would be the three areas of concern that I have.
When you look at it, I mean, it looks like, draft wise and everything, they've filled those positions. So, I mean, that's not a lot to worry about. And this is a team that went to the NFC Championship game and almost, got to the Super Bowl. I mean, the start of the playoffs, they weren't expected to get there, but they were a team that everyone was scared of, getting into the playoffs, and they proved why. So when you look at 2022, what are your expectations for this team?
I think they're going to go as Trey Lance goes. Like I said, if he plays at Jimmy Garoppolo's level, I think that they'll contend for the Super Bowl. If he doesn't, then they may struggle to make the playoffs. If he goes beyond what Garoppolo does, then I would probably, and I'm probably a little biased, but I think I would pick them to be the favorites. But again, it's hard to take a kid who's played only 10 quarters and say he's going to lead his team to a Super Bowl title this year. But I expect they're going to be able to run the ball. Their receivers are going to be good. The defense is going to be great. So I would expect them to be really good this year. Hopefully they don't go through what they went through in the beginning of the season when they were unhealthy and they were losing games that they shouldn't lose. I really don't know why that was happening, but they were playing terrible. And if they can avoid that, and if they can avoid catastrophic injuries like to Nick Bosa or George Kittle, players like that, Deebo, then I think that they'll be one of the top teams in the league.
Worst case scenario, even if nobody gets injured, say Trey Lance is just trying to figure things out. They don't make the playoffs, but you still see some positive things from Trey Lance. I mean, are you going to look at this season as a step forward if they don't make the playoffs, but you see some flashes of Trey Lance doing well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's still going to be disappointing because how often are you able to build a roster that's this good and have be able to put these guys together? It's hard to win in the NFL, and it's even harder to win in the playoffs in the NFL. And so they've built a team that can do that. And so yeah, it'll be hugely disappointing, but I think that if Trey shows a lot of composure and a lot of really good things and has a lot of growth, then I think probably the fans will be more patient than if they were if they would have done this last year with Garoppolo. I mean, there were fans that wanted Trey to play. There were fans calling for Kyle Shanahan to be fired and John Lynch, but those guys have done a great job putting together a really good roster. So I don't think that firing them is the right thing. But yeah, I depending on how Trey Lance looks, we could see them missing the playoffs and still walk away from it with some encouragement.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing in the NFL is having a quarterback, and if you find some good things in a quarterback, you need to stick with them and ride that quarterback and look for the future. Because I mean, that as a Bears fan, I know that, and I've lived that, and I would be remiss as a Bears fan if I didn't bring up one of my favorite all-time former Bears, Robbie Gold, and I just wondering, how does he keep kicking so long, and how many more years does Robbie Gold have left?
I don't know. He's got to be getting close to 80 now, but he still can go out there. And there was a game, I don't remember which one it was. I think it was the final game of the regular season when the 49ers had to win to get in. And the punter, Mitch Wishnowsky, was injured. And I think he got knocked out of the game with a concussion. And Robbie Gold had to go from being just the kicker to now also being the punter, and he actually punted really well. And not only that, but Wishnowsky was his holder, and so he lost him, and I think Kyle Juszczyk had to be the holder. So not only did he have to shift gears to a different holder, but he had to start punting. But yeah, he's a gamer, man. That guy just makes big kick after big kick. So yeah, I'm glad the 49ers have him.
I'm definitely missing him as a Bears fan. I mean, that makes a difference when you have, someone you can drive down and you have a tough drive, you can rely on. And he just hasn't been that his entire career. I have no idea why the Bears got rid of him.
Yeah, I don't either. And, he, at this point, he's not as accurate on those deep ones, but they know that. And so they set him up for success. And yeah, I remember you guys lost a playoff game because of a kicker. Not long after Robbie Gold went to San Francisco. So yeah, that's you don't want to come down to your season relying on a kicker that can't make a kick.
Well, one last thing, it's not quite fantasy football season yet, but for some it always is, dynasty and everything. And when you look at the 49ers right now, are there, do you want to like steer everyone away from the 49ers backfield?
Yeah.
What do you see? Yeah.
Yeah. I just think when they had Raheem Mostert, he was a threat at any point to break off an 80-yard run, and then in the same game have an 80-yard catch and run. They don't have any big hitters right now, unless Ty Davis Price shows that, but he didn't show it in college, so I don't expect him to be a guy that breaks off the big ones like Mostert would do. No, I would say stay away from the 49ers running backs at first. If you want to pick Elisha Mitchell, then go for it. But Kittle's going to be a good pick. Deebo is going to be a good pick. Trey Lance might be a good pick. Ayuk might be a good pick. The 49ers defense, I think, will be a great pick. Robbie Gold is sometimes a good one because he always makes his kicks. And I think that this offense is going to be in scoring position a lot. But yeah, the running backs, it's hard to, unless they get to where you can see that they're driving the ball a lot and then down at the goal line giving it to Ty Davis Price or Jeff Wilson Jr. or somebody like that, then I probably would stay away from them unless it's Mitchell.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at, this team and as a fantasy football player, yeah, I definitely look at the offenses and, I would look at, maybe later round picks, having those as a Flyers, but you want to be able to rely on a running back as a bell cow back. And
yeah,
it's interesting. You look at the 49ers, I wondered if Elijah Mitchell would become that, but it doesn't seem that that's going to be the case.
Yeah. He was nicked up so much last year. And he there were a lot of games that he just gutted it out because there was nobody behind him. That's why Deebo Samuel ran the ball so much late in the season and in the playoffs, because there was no one else. I mean, there was Jeff Wilson Jr., but for some reason, I don't know if he wasn't fully healthy and so they didn't want to use him. But yeah, he was really nicked up. And I think that's one of the reasons why they went with Ty Davis Price to have more of a committee going. And we still don't know what's going to happen with Trey Sermon.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting thing to watch. And well, I definitely appreciate you coming on to talk 49ers.
My pleasure.
And where can everyone find you again?
On Twitter, I'm at 49ers Camelot, or you can go to 49erswebzone.com and go to the site staff section. I think it's under resources, and you can find my picture there and click on articles or contact, send me hate mail or whatever you want to do. I'm fine with whatever, but yeah, 49ers Camelot on Twitter.
So no TikTok yet?
No. My son told me I should try it for 49ers stuff. And so I tried it for like 2 days and I was like, yeah, I'm not interested in this.
Yeah. I just started Instagram and I think that's about as far as I'll go. I don't think I'll do TikTok.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again. We'll definitely have to connect, when the season starts and gets
Yeah.
closer, and even in season. It's going to be an exciting season.
Yeah, it will be. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Once again, this has been NFL Outdated Cover 2 series on the San Francisco 49ers. Thanks again, Marc Adams.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.